Andrew Tate.
And I will crack the matrix.
The controversial social media influencer Andrew Tate.
The rising attractiveness of figures like Andrew Tate.
I'm not a generalized person. I'm an exceptional person. Everything you've learned and everyone you've ever spoken to and everything in your books does not apply to me because I am exceptional and I'm smarter than you and I've done things you could never do and I'm a world champion athlete and I'm richer than you'll ever be. So nothing you know can possibly apply to my mindset. So why are we sitting here talking?
Loneliness. It is something that most of us have experienced at one point or another. As human beings, our need for connection is intrinsic to who we are. But what groups of people do we usually associate with the cold shadow of loneliness? Perhaps the elderly, the sick or disabled, a mourning widow maybe. Now, who do we often forget about? What group of people do we rarely associate with loneliness in terms of our general understanding of broader society? Young men. A study by Pew Research showed that more than 60% of young men are single, nearly twice the rate of young women. In a 2023 questionnaire by Equimundo, administered to men between the ages of 18 to 45 across the United States, their report found that 44% of all men had thoughts of suicide in the prior 2 weeks, with young men showing the highest levels of depressive symptoms and suicidal ideation. 15% of men report having no close friendships, a five-fold increase from 1990, according to research by the Survey Center on American Life. But why is it that the fact that young men are increasingly suffering from loneliness and social isolation appears to elicit limited, if any, empathy from the wider public or policymakers? Is it possible that we ourselves are operating from the same logic of traditional forms of masculinity that we say are toxic and harmful?
Wait, come on, shut up.
Are we the ones actually internalizing ideas about male self-sufficiency, male self-reliance, and male toughness that blocks us from seeing struggling young men as people worthy of compassion? Or do we see helping young men as a zero-sum game that somehow takes us away from the unfinished fight for gender equality for women and non-binary folks? The truth is that with broader shifts in the political economy, the rise of loneliness in young men is a result of various social, political, and cultural forces. Changing gender roles, rising numbers of young men struggling in school, advanced globalized markets leaving many jobs automated and outsourced, the alienating effects of a deeply precarious job market, various institutions collapsing or in the process of transformation, and the very gendered nature of labor itself rightly shifting beneath our feet. And with society not being able to keep up with these rapid changes, many men are left in difficult societal positions, especially men who find themselves at the intersection of neurodivergence, economic disadvantage, and racial marginalization. For many young men, thoughts of having a family, being a respected member of the community, all seems like a fairy tale. But to the struggling and lonely men, what does the mainstream say? Many have said, this is not a big deal. These men just feel entitled to women's bodies. Nobody owes them sex. Maybe if they weren't living in their mother's basement, get a job. They still have male privilege. It's because they don't even know how to talk to women.
Stepdad, he has emotional problems.
Oh, I have those too. What kind of emotional problems does your dad have?
Who cares? They're just a bunch of loser incels. And with these limited understandings of the problem and the lack of concern from society, who comes in to address the issues of these struggling young men? Who sees young men as people who, just like most other people, have a need for connection, who want to feel desired, and who want to be in romantic relationships? Enter the red pill and people like Andrew Tate. But what exactly is it about the red pill and people like Andrew Tate that seems so fascinating, so irresistible to so many young men? And why is it that Andrew Tate, who seemingly came out of nowhere, became one of the most Googled people on the planet?
If you don't like what I do, but you watch everything I'm doing, you're still a fan. So who owns the internet? Top G.
And what is it about the red pill's message that can seemingly make red pill YouTubers famous practically overnight? To truly understand the allure of the red pill and the fascination with figures like Andrew Tate, we have to first understand who it is that they're talking to. We have to understand their audience. But a disclaimer, this is not an endorsement of the red pill and figures like Andrew Tate. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Many videos already exist debunking the ideas of the red pill, and Andrew Tate is currently being outed as a sex trafficker. Instead, this video was made to help us understand what makes the red pill's ideology so enticing. If you watch this video, I promise you have a better understanding of why all this is happening. And we can talk about solutions, but for that you have to stick to the end. For now, we will dive into the world of those who fall victim to these ideologies, and that will allow us to see things for what they really are. Imagine you are a young man. In high school, you were an average student and you got average grades. You were bullied sometimes, but everybody's been bullied, right? That's just a normal part of life. You remember one of your schoolmates asking you, "Dude, why are you so awkward?" You never really knew what they were talking about. You felt you were normal just like everybody else. Or maybe you've always felt a little different. You do remember when you were younger overhearing your teacher tell your mother that you might be on the autism spectrum, but you never got a test to confirm that. Your mother was dealing with a lot back then. She and your father got divorced when you were 11. You hardly ever see him, and when you do, the conversations are plain and superficial. Even since he got laid off from his job, he hasn't been the same energetic father that you remember him to be. You had 2 close friends, but they both went off to college after high school. You tried to keep in touch with them, but over time you lost contact, and on Facebook every now and then, you see that they're having the time of their life. You decided not to go to college because you didn't quite know what you wanted to do in life, and your father told you don't waste their money going to college if you don't even know what to major in. So you take a few classes at the local community college, but none of the classes pique your interest. One day, your mother tells you that you have to get a job because you're an adult, and adults pay rent. And so you apply to a bunch of places, and eventually you get a job at a restaurant 2 miles away from your house. One day on your way to work, you see a man driving a beautiful woman in a fancy car. And you're not necessarily filled with envy, because the way your life's been going so far, you think that a life like that simply wasn't meant for you. As the weeks go by, you develop a crush on the girl that you work with. She's beautiful. She's friendly. And for months you tell yourself that there's no way that she would take you seriously, and that there's no point in asking her on a date. But 2 months go by, and you finally muster the courage to ask her for her number. You approach her, but you stutter a little bit. It's obvious you're nervous. At first she seems surprised and almost hesitant, but she obliges, and she gives you her number. Now things are looking up. You wonder why you ever doubted yourself so much. Maybe she could be your first girlfriend. You wonder with hope and excitement. But as the days go by, her text messages become less and less frequent. At work, she makes sure to remain friendly, but never really entertains or takes seriously your attempts to flirt with her or build a more intimate rapport. When you finally ask her if she wants to go on a date, she lets you know that her life is too complicated at the moment, and she doesn't think that would be good for her right now. You take it on the chin, and you assure her that it's no hard feelings and that you understand. However, a few months later, a new guy starts at your job. He's tall, and he's handsome. The women at your job seem to be almost immediately very fond of him. A few weeks later, you happen to catch your crush in the parking lot with that same guy. They are clearly more than just friends. You see them kiss, and your heart sinks. What's wrong with me, you ask yourself? Teary-eyed, you head home, you look in the mirror and stare silently. The next morning, determined, you go to the mall to buy new clothes. Not unsimilar to the clothes of the guy who seemed to win the heart of the girl you still have a crush on. You also pick up a new video game and a headset, and you play video games long into the night, a welcome escape that distracts you from your own sadness. Later, you're walking home, more frustrated than ever before. Your friend from college was back in town and invited you to a small get-together, and another girl that you wanted to talk to, who you had seen around, seemed to quickly brush you off when you worked up enough courage to approach her. And later she seemed to be enamored by another guy and talked to him all night long. Rejected again. You realize you're 21 years old, you've never had a girlfriend, you've never had a date, and something you wouldn't whisper to a soul you've never even had a real kiss before, the feeling inside you is painful, aching, and embarrassing. Herein lies the grievance, the personal shame, the feelings of rejection. You could be a young man, lost and unable to find a romantic partner, or a young man dealing with a painful breakup, or a man much older picking up the pieces after a crushing divorce. It doesn't matter. All of these scenarios lead to the same place. You are angry, frustrated, and you are unhappy with who you are. You take a look at yourself in the mirror and wonder to yourself, why would any woman want me? But with your last glimmer of hope, you go to your computer and you type the magic words. How to get a girlfriend. And so it begins. You may not be aware of it, but you've just started your algorithmic descent into the red pill. The descent is a rush. For the last 3 months in between playing video games, you've stumbled on a new internet culture called the red pill, and you can't stop watching the videos. The feeling you have inside of you is both shock and relief. You can't believe that all this time there were dozens of men on the internet who knew exactly what you were going through. And these men seem to know the secrets about the true female nature. One of the first things you learn is the truth about how women really feel about most men.
Women don't actually care about you, and it's just a fact of female nature that you guys are gonna just have to accept.
They're lame. Like, have y'all ever tried going on a date with somebody? Like, they're lame as fuck.
I'll give you that, yeah.
I hate men, but don't
Right.
men pay your salary
Right.
for OnlyFans?
Yep, thank you, goodbye.
You come across red pill self-help gurus who seem to have undergone their own self-transformations and have ascended into alpha malehood. An alpha male or high-value male, you learn, is the malehood you should aspire to. You learn a high-value man is somebody that's not just confident, but is dominant. They do what they want. They are muscular, aggressive, independent, ambitious, financially successful, unemotional men. And all the women want alpha males. Their advice on how to become one: get in the gym, get confident, get money, and then you get the girls. You start going to the gym, and for 3 months you're feeling better about yourself. But you get injured because you push too hard, too quickly. And the doctor tells you that you have to wait 3 months before you can lift weights again. In the meantime, you keep watching red pill videos. At first, it was just videos on self-help and self-improvement. How to work out for the best gains, how to make money with crypto or drop shipping, how to text a girl or be confident. But then the algorithm keeps putting other videos on your YouTube feed, and then you start to learn red pill terminology. You were told if the alpha male is the pinnacle of manhood, the beta male is the subordinated male, the weak man unable to bend his environment to his will. You learn beta males are the losers, the failures, the men who have to bring flowers on dates and give money to women just to earn a little bit of their attention.
Did you ever think that maybe she's just using you to get her alcohol? She doesn't want your dick.
The beta takes women on dates, and after the date, the women go sleep with the alphas. Without the red pill, that's who many men are destined to be. Without true knowledge of female nature, you foolishly used to believe that women are sweet, docile creatures who appreciate kind gestures and intimate emotionality. No, the red pill informs you that beta males are the hopelessly lost nice guys, and that's who you are. Except you can't even get a date.
Why do nice people choose the wrong people to date?
Are we talking about anyone specific?
We accept the love we think we deserve.
Guys have this Disney fairy tale in their head that girls are sugar and spice and everything nice, and they're, goody two-shoes, whatever. Hell no. These girls are out here getting dick, banging a bunch of dudes, dating non-monogamously, banging more dudes in a semester than guys banging their whole life.
But why are women like this, you ask yourself? Don't they like guys who will treat them well? Why do they go for guys who will always cheat on them and make them feel like crap? And in search to the answer for that question, you stumble on one of the hallmark theories of the red pill: hypergamy. Hypergamy, you are told, is a biological instinct and drive that all women have to chase men with status, prestige, and dominance. You learn that while men are very willing to date people down their socioeconomic class, most women are incapable of doing so for the long term. You learn that women are inherently unloyal and that they will always pursue men who are better, richer, with more status. Things like having a good personality or an emotional connection are all misdirections that women say that they want to hide the unflattering reality of what they are really attracted to. The game is rigged.
Why do they make that if you can't even win? Then why am I freaking playing?
You feel absolutely crushed by this reality. You look at your own life. How could you possibly measure up to other men surrounded by dozens of women and fast cars? Whatever loneliness you felt before is now a drop in the bucket of the loneliness that you feel now. Your situation is hopeless, you think to yourself, and then you find more videos of Andrew Tate.
I don't think most women can actually genuinely understand how lonely the majority of men are.
I agree.
And you need to truly understand, if you're Joe Schmo, average in nearly every way, in Starbucks working, you ain't getting a DM ever. You girls will never be lonely. As much as you might be unhappy with the possible suitors, you can at least fuck about and flirt if you feel sad. Yeah. There are men out here in the world who have genuine loneliness.
No other man has been able to so accurately speak to your misery. For the first time, you feel seen and understood. On these videos and podcasts, there are endless women blaming men for their own loneliness, saying that they don't approach women or that they have bad hygiene, but this guy seems to understand. He gets it. And now every day when you wake up, you search the internet for more videos of him. I just need to hear somebody tell the world how I feel, you say to yourself. Despair begins to grow inside of you. You are in pain and alone with seemingly no options. You're a loser. But you're not alone. People in the red pill tell you that there are many young men just like you, and that most men in general are invisible to women.
The majority of the guys in this planet are unseen and unheard.
Most men are basically invisible.
Most men are wallpaper.
You're a normal man with a normal job. You don't really exist in the online world. It's very difficult to get followers. Nobody replies to your DMs. You don't really matter. You don't have access to the sexual marketplace. It's very difficult for you to even get any kind of recognition that you're even alive. And a lot of men feel lost and lonely because of that.
You feel invisible, and you are told that you are invisible because the world is designed this way. It's not just because you might be on the autism spectrum, socially awkward. It's not because you're not handsome or tall enough. The red pill tells you it's because of feminism. Spokespeople of the red pill inform you that when women fought for their rights in the 70s, they destroyed the gender roles that our society had relied on for so long. Feminism destroyed marriage. Feminism destroyed a man's rightful place as the leader and breadwinner of the family. All of the personality traits that men have traditionally had were now called toxic masculinity. What's wrong with wanting to protect your woman, the red pillers ask. If robbers break into the house, surely the man would have to be the one to protect her. So why shouldn't women be submissive to men as they have been historically? Women won't be submissive because they aren't feminine anymore, the red pillars explain. Women are seeking jobs and careers and are deprioritizing having a family and kids. And now as they make more money, they still want to have a man that makes more money than them. You are told because of feminism, women have social dominance over men, and now their expectations are through the roof.
For the 27-year-old man, what would you want his income to be?
I would have to say 127, probably 150 to $250,000 a year.
150, maybe to 250,000 a year.
Like 300,000. Like, I guess if they made less than that, I feel like we wouldn't have the lifestyle I wanted.
$500,000. Ideally, my husband needs to be making like $650,000.
In seeing how the modern woman thinks, you are first filled with sadness, more sadness than when you saw your crush with the guy that you work with. But in time, that sadness turns to anger, bitterness, and resentment. How can these women expect so much from us? What kind of guy even makes $650,000 a year, you ask yourself? Doctors don't even make that much money. These women are outrageous. In time, you start to join live chats when red pill content creators are debating women on their podcasts. You start to send in money so that the podcasters can read your comments to the women during their live shows. And like the other people in the chat, you hurl insults at the women and you tell them they will never find a man because their expectations are too high. Nobody's going to date a single mother with kids, you type frantically. They don't read your comment because you didn't send enough money. And even though you're not making much money yourself, you send a $50 super chat to make sure that they read your comments just so you can see the look on women's faces when you insult them. The feeling of revenge is intoxicating. These are the women with outrageous expectations. These are the women that would never date you. These are the women that because of feminism will only date rich, handsome assholes that treat them like shit. And now you're in a community that feels the exact same way. You read a comment under another Red Pill video that makes the same point. The community that you have with these other men in the Red Pill is better than any community that you have offline. There's a camaraderie there, a shared frustration, a rage to tell these women the truth. Your hatred for them grows. But sometimes these Red Pill podcasts invite women that are really sexy. You type in the chat, "No man of high value would ever marry a girl who does OnlyFans." You snicker at what you wrote. And you spend the next 2 hours during the podcast calling her a slut. But when the live stream is over, you find her OnlyFans account and you subscribe. $20 to see this delusional chick get railed. She's stupid and she'll be alone forever. She is hot, you say to yourself. I'll subscribe, why not? You know that you're a hypocrite, but you rationalize your conflicting feelings away. Eventually, you realize watching all of these videos isn't helping you get a girlfriend. It isn't helping you get laid, so you spend less time watching Red Pill videos and you get back in the gym. Every now and then, you remember some of the advice that you heard while watching these videos. Be confident, you remember. Act like you don't really need her. She has to get on your program. 6 months later, if you lost some weight and some of your muscles are beginning to show, you've approached 25 girls as instructed by the Red Pill pickup artists, and 2 of them agree to go on a date with you. One of them flakes and never shows up. You shrug it off, at least you have another girl waiting for you. Let's see how it goes, you tell yourself expectantly. All I have to do is maintain a masculine frame. You're feeling confident after the date as you're heading back home. You replay the conversation that you had with her in your head. Like a true high-value man, you were unemotional. When she said something you didn't like, you told her. You recall explaining to her how you wanted a submissive woman, and that's how women are naturally supposed to be. But not too long after the date, you receive a message that you read stunned. "Hey, thanks for the date tonight. I'm not sure if I can do a second date. I think we're better off as friends." Trying to fight back tears, you stare confused at the screen. "There is no hope for people like me," you say to yourself. "All of this Red Pill bullshit hasn't been working. I acted confidently. I cold approached dozens of women. This Red Pill stuff doesn't work. What's the point?" you ask yourself. And here we arrive at the sad truth that so many young men realize, that the Red Pill doesn't give them the results that they were looking for. Instead, it gives them an archetype of manhood that even the Red Pill content creators themselves cannot live up to. It creates feelings of inauthenticity and disingenuousness. It offers theoretical ideas of how to deal with women based on traditional gender roles that simply don't work in today's society. Women don't respond to caricatures of ultra-manliness. And the Red Pill seems to overlook one of the most fundamental building blocks of building romantic relationships, which is an emotional connection. That part was never taught to you by the Red Pill, because you're always supposed to suppress your emotions. Now, misguided and confused and unaware of how to become a better version of yourself that could attract women and bring you opportunities for the meaningful relationships that you so desire, you retreat deeper into your misery and despair. With almost no friends, no girlfriends, browsing the internet, you see a new term that you haven't seen before: incel. You find various websites where they all seem to congregate. Alas, you've come to the final stage of this dark algorithmic journey, the black pill. The anger remains, but now with it lies a deep resignation and a grueling hopelessness. However, the dark brooding of this new group of young men called incels that you found online seem to match your inner state, but their terminology is different. First, you learn what an incel is. An incel is somebody who is involuntary celibate. They are young men who want to have sex, but no woman wants to have sex with them. Next, you learn a femoid. A femoid is what they call women. And lastly, you learn who a Chad is. You learn Chads are the men who are truly sexually successful with women. The men who are born with genetic gifts of handsomeness and are destined to have their pick of the litter when it comes to women. You learn that all of the silly ideas about being a high-value man and the work that it takes to become one is all just a big cope. You learn that the red pill is just coping with the fact that some men were born losers and some men were born winners. And that's how it always has been, and that's how it always will be. A Chad is born with a slender, natural, sleek, and strong-looking body with good facial symmetry and a strong jawline. You pore over videos where you see people explaining to great precision and detail facial structure and how so many other men were destined to be ugly in the eyes of women. You read on one of these dark message boards a message that explains it precisely. Yup, genetics are the only things that matter. Femoids can give the typical blue-pilled response, but once my aunt saw the hunter eyes and superior frame of the Chad, she immediately got wet like a dog in heat. Femoids can't fight biological ticks. I know it, you say to yourself. Of course the red pill doesn't work. It's just a bunch of men trying to cope with the reality that all the women go after the top 5% of men, and the rest of us are left with scraps if anything at all. You're advised by other incels to not even bother approaching women because it'll drive you more and more insane.
What are you doing later?
I don't know.
I do.
Do you?
I know exactly.
Handsome men with no game and no charisma practically disrespecting women, still getting their numbers and having sex with them. You come to the painful conclusion that what the incels say is true. No matter how nice you are, no matter what your hobbies or your personality, ultimately it is the Chad who all women want. You can't get sexier by other means like status, prestige, and money, as the red pill had you believe. You are an incel. An incel is a subhuman, you are told. You're sub 5, someone who ranks below average on the scale of attractiveness. You are told that if you flirt with a girl as a Chad, it will be seen as charisma, and she will be smitten. But if you flirt with a girl as an incel, it will be seen as sexual harassment, and she'll be disgusted. And with all of this, most women still think men are living in sexual abundance because they are.
Here, let me frame the question like this. Agree or disagree? Do women have dating on easy mode? Kiko, yes or no?
I know a lot of guys who are very average and they don't have any problem finding women to sleep with or date or anything. It's just knowing who's on your level.
But is finding someone to sleep with really fulfilling?
I would love
That's
to
what
hear
we're talking
Billy
about.
on this. Please come in.
I have across platforms probably over 800,000 followers that are all single men. That's why they follow me for dating advice. And I get thousands of messages every day from attractive guys that cannot get a date.
What a joke, you say to yourself. Women aren't living in reality and they have no clue what most of us men have to go through. You keep searching the internet and you come to find other men who can't get a girlfriend as well.
I am 25 and I have no friends.
So I'm a 26-year-old and I've never had a girlfriend in my entire life.
I'm 29 years old. I have no friends.
I am 20 years old and I've never had a girlfriend before.
Wow, you say to yourself. I can't believe there are so many other losers like me. You're filled with so many negative emotions, but at least now you have a place where social rejects like you can wallow in. You see another post on an incel forum and they agree. The bright side of the black pill is knowing it's over anyway, so I can relax and enjoy watching Brazil versus Austria soccer game on TV with my family. Defeated by the world, you fall deeper into the abyss of complacency and resignation. Long, lonely nights are filled with pornography and video games. You hate yourself. You hate the world. You hate the universe that doomed you to this miserable life. So disengaged you are from the world, you come to work late one too many times, and after several warnings, they fire you. Your mother eventually notices that you've stopped going to work. She informs you that she called your job to see if you were still working there, and they told her that they fired you weeks ago, and you need to find another job. But you yell back at her in anger. You tell her that it's none of her business, and you'll get a job when you want to. She's shocked. Even as your mother, she's never seen this side of you. Confused and hurt, she leaves you to your dark, depressive room. Go ahead and play video games all day then, she says, walking away in frustration. Maybe it's her fault, you tell yourself. She's the one that brought you into this world. Shouldn't she be in part responsible for your suffering, you ask yourself? Images flash in your head of when you were bullied in high school and how the jocks called you a loser. You can't help but to think to yourself, maybe they were right. Back to the incel message boards you go. You don't know what to do with this rage that you have, this hatred for everyone around you. You start to see people recommending other underground internet communities. Groups for men's rights or groups for preserving white heritage. You don't care which because they're all speaking your language. The world has to change. Society didn't used to be like this 50 years ago, you say to yourself. LGBTQ rights, affirmative action, immigration, all of these movements are part of the problem, these message boards tell you. If it weren't for all these groups, every man would have his wife and could provide for his family. But the degenerates are destroying our country. You are seething with rage. On the incel message boards, you see other incels casually encourage others to commit mass violence or take their own lives. Tragically, you mistake their dark humor for literal instructions. Most other incels complain about their autism, but your autism was never properly diagnosed and you've always had problems understanding humor, especially ironic humor. They tell you revenge is the only way to mean anything in this world as an incel. They call it revenge on a world that has wronged them, the Chads, the Femoids, everybody who has destroyed the fabric of this nation. At this point, you decide that it is the only way your life could ever have meaning. You are told that every real man should own a gun, and if you don't know how to shoot a gun, you're not a real man. So with the little money that you have saved up, you buy a rifle and... And here is the place where so many young men end up in today's society. What started as an honest desire for a romantic relationship ends in a young man being far more broken, resentful, lonely, and depressed. In a search for answers, young men are taking down a path of frustration and despair. Not only are they indoctrinated into a hateful, tragically flawed worldview, but so many also become radicalized in spaces with other young men misleading one another. And some eventually decide to join extremist groups and make their own violent plans as a last-ditch quest for significance. But what if I told you it didn't have to be like this? What if I told you we could prevent this? What if I told you we could go back?
I don't think most women can actually genuinely understand.
You see, these stories aren't a sum of individual decisions made by lost young men. The place where so many of these young men end up is a result of a variety of social, cultural, and technological forces, all of which do not provide adequate solutions to the troubles and challenges that young men face in today's society. And so this obviously begs the question, well, what should we do? And to that question, there are no easy answers. I, like other people, have been thinking about how to engage with this problem, and it is a problem that we of all genders have to struggle against. We have to first understand what is happening, acknowledge it, and put forth our ideas about how to address it. The truth is that the red pill and figures like Andrew Tate identify with young men, and sometimes can make genuine insights, but unfortunately offer deeply problematic and misogynist conclusions. Our society will not take women out of the workforce, and will never go back to the 1950s, no matter how many red pill content creators reminisce about the glorious days, about our far more patriarchal past. Women have courageously fought for equal rights, and no amount of whining on the internet is going to change that. One thing that does have to change, however, is how we understand masculinity in the modern world. Feminism, especially second-wave feminism, was a movement that needed to happen. With advances in medicine and contraceptives, people were starting to live longer, and there was no justification to keep women in the house primarily as caregivers and bearers of children. Of course, to give birth and to bring life into this world is a beautiful thing, and will always be beautiful, but women are more than their ability to give birth and nurture children. They can become scientists, politicians, artists, and the like. So the solution for men in a world that has made advances for gender equality cannot be a frustrated retreat back to traditional gender roles. Instead, what must happen is a transformation of manhood that is flexible enough to keep up with the demands and realities of today's society. We no longer live in the Paleolithic times where the man with the biggest club or the biggest muscles or the best hunters reigned supreme. In today's society, which is infinitely more complex, we need men capable of a variety of other skills. I think it's important to note here that while the situation that many young find themselves in is due to a variety of socio-historical forces, society is not just an external unchangeable force. It's a complex system of relationships, norms, and institutions that are created and maintained and can be changed by collective human action. Additionally, men have a meaningful degree of personal agency within their own social context. So naming these social forces is not an attempt to say that the destiny of young men is deterministic or fatalist, but to develop a keen awareness of the reality that creating a society where young men can flourish has to be both changes in personal decisions and, perhaps more importantly, collective action that undermines socio-historical structures that have traditionally put men in positions of dominance, power, and even disposability. In other words, both the individual and the society has to change. First, we have to acknowledge that simplistic advice such as go outside or men have to become more feminine is neither effective nor a message that resonates with young men. Young men want to feel proud of who they are. They want to feel powerful, and we have to celebrate that, especially because people visit online spaces that strengthen and affirm their identities. In the future, I will make more videos where we can go more in depth, but for now, I'll offer 6 different solutions for us to consider in the meantime. So what would it look like to recreate a form of masculinity that can keep up with the changing times? Let's look at what we can do on a personal level. If we consider a variety of characteristics that are considered traditionally masculine, we can see that these are in need of an upgrade, given the more complex world that we live in. So if we look at some traditional characteristics of masculinity, we can see how to challenge or improve them. First, as opposed to the old ideas of men being these emotional, stoic, and unemotional beings, men need to incorporate and recognize the power of emotional intelligence. This is not just men sitting around crying about their feelings, although as an emotional response, humans are the only animal that sheds tears or needs to. But more broadly, emotional intelligence can be thought of as the ability to recognize one's emotions and to work through them, and also the ability to recognize emotional changes in other people and help guide others process their own emotions as well. It takes courage to be honest about one's feelings and to learn how to process them, especially in social contexts where other people are present. But I can say confidently that almost all of us admire people who can name the emotions that are present and palpable in certain situations because we know it takes bravery to do so. And given the fact that men self-transition 4 times the rate as women, men developing emotional intelligence will literally save lives. Next are the traditionally masculine ideas of independence and self-reliance. Young men are trained to do things alone and to rely on themselves. So, of course, in certain contexts, that ability can be very useful. But in today's society where we're deeply interconnected, learning to develop social networks and building alliances is far more powerful and useful. The old adage goes, it's not about what you know, but who you know. If men developed and indeed celebrated the ability to build social networks and alliances, so many men wouldn't be as alone and isolated as they are now. And they would necessarily develop themselves socially and become far more dynamic and interesting individuals. And lastly, on a personal level, the old world called for men to be dominant and aggressive. And it's not a secret that these traits might not just be socially conditioned, but have certain underpinnings in male biology. But what if we could transform the inclination towards domination to strength with constraint and change aggression to thoughtful assertiveness? Red pill content creators often say men's roles are to provide and protect. But what they fail to mention is that even in the traditional understandings of masculinity, strength was mostly and necessarily defensive strength. It was about stopping violence and abuse. It was about the ability to stand up to bullies and to those who sought to do harm. Strength is important, but it has to come with restraint, and it has to have peacemaking capabilities. In a simpler world, perhaps outright aggressiveness was useful, but now assertiveness with thoughtful reflection makes a far more effective man. So men do have to adopt more healthy versions of manhood, but we also have to change society collectively. Number 1, we must challenge narratives that demonize young men and boys. We have to recognize that for the most part, young men and boys do what they do not because of any inherently problematic characteristics, but because society hasn't provided them with cohesive, visible, and appealing alternatives. This means developing an empathetic and compassionate response to the plight of young men. This doesn't mean that we do not hold men accountable, but that we recognize the way men are developed exists because society has shaped and socialized them in very specific ways. And most importantly, we have to recognize the intrinsic value that young men and boys have. Each and every man is needed and has a valuable role in bettering our society. Number 2, we have to build social networks for growing boys that support and build healthy versions of manhood. The current U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek H. Murthy, announced an initiative to build social infrastructure that includes school-based programs that teach children about building healthy relationships and community programs that bring people together in order to combat loneliness. What has to be included in this is the recognition that boys are often socialized into ideas of manhood that aren't socially successful in adulthood. So we need to start early by guiding parents and supporting boys to be connected, caring, and cooperative. Programs must teach parents to encourage boys to develop offline relational literacy. Additionally, we have to push for programs that expand efforts to involve sports coaches and other voices who influence boys. Futures Without Violence and other organizations, including Inside Out and Mentors in Violence Prevention and other groups, have long engaged coaches in sports as a space to engage boys and men. And finally, number 3. We need to push a cohesive and versatile masculinity into the mainstream that young men can be proud of. In essence, we need a new manosphere, one that guides men towards more versatile and useful ideas of manhood while providing a space for community and a sense of purpose. Progressives and leftists have a tendency to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But part of the purpose of this video was to show that there are real, understandable reasons why young men fall victim to red pill ideology. It would be far more productive to learn about these insights and dispose of their problematic conclusions in the service of constructing more sound, more healthy versions of masculinity that are actually enticing to young men. Many men throughout the modern world are already developing their own ways of navigating the 21st century. So while I have my own ideas, I think it's best to do this in communion and in conversation with other men who are wrestling with this very problem. So I'm going to create a Discord for this channel, and in it there'll be a space for men to talk with each other, build community, and most importantly, champion this new dynamic masculinity. Dynamic masculinity is what I'm calling it for now. So with that said, I'll put a link for the Discord in the description of the video, and these 6 ideas are just the beginning of what I think is a far more broad and complicated topic, and so I'm excited to continue this conversation in future videos. Thank you for listening. I hope I offered you something to chew on. See you next time. And don't forget to subscribe or watch some of my other videos. I would really appreciate it. See you next time.